Hey everyone, this is Heidi, who you know from AllFreeKnitting's knitting video tutorials. One of the things that is really popular in the knitting and crochet community is charity knitting. You'll find a lot of things that are like charity knitting projects for chemo caps, for cancer patients, hats for preemies, and toys for underprivileged kids, and so many different things. And it's one of the things I love about the yarn community. One thing though that is a concept that I feel like is kind of underrepresented in the knitting world is prayer shawls. When my grandfather was in the intensive care unit near the end of his life, some very kind person from my grandmother's church gave her a handmade crocheted prayer shawl that she has to this day, and it brought her a lot of comfort in her time of need. And so I wanted to just talk to you about some of the key things to keep in mind about prayer shawls. So first up, why does somebody need or want to make a prayer shawl? So prayer shawls can be very comforting to a person who's grieving or going through, let's say, a really difficult medical diagnosis. But on the other end of things, knitting or crocheting a prayer shawl can be very therapeutic for the person making it. It gives you a way to give something very special that you've invested your time and creative skills in to someone you care about when you can't be there bothering them at, say, the hospital all the time. There's a couple things to keep in mind. Prayer shawls, if you're making them for someone in a wheelchair, let's say, one key thing to keep in mind that is easy to forget about is if you want it to be a prayer shawl that doubles as a lap blanket, make sure that it doesn't exceed 4 feet in length because it might get tangled up in the person's wheels, which obviously you wouldn't want. Another thing to keep in mind is if the person you're making this for has any allergies. Some people do have wool allergies. A friend of mine has a wool allergy. And so if you want to avoid wool for that person, you can consider things like cotton, linen, or even artificial fibers. And another key thing is if you're giving a person a prayer shawl, whether they're a caregiver for a person who is going through a difficult medical situation, or let's say you give it to someone who has a child that's going to be in the NICU for a long time, you might want to make sure that you're using an easy to care for fiber like acrylic or a superwash wool, because the person may have to deal with fluids getting on it from time to time, especially if they're also sick, and you're going to want to give them or the caregiver something that's easy to take care of. Now, speaking of giving people a prayer shawl made in an easy to launder material, you might want to also give the person you're gifting the shawl to a little card that goes over how to care for the shawl itself. The shawl I have here is a cotton linen blend, so I'm going to want to include to the person I gift this to that they might want to be careful about not putting this in the dryer. You also, if you're giving them wool that's not superwash, make sure to tell them to, lie the garment flat, etc., etc. But this all goes back to why you might want to use an easy to care for fiber. If you're also looking for occasions to give people prayer shawls, keep in mind that they're most often given in a serious time of need, like when someone might have a diagnosis of cancer or another terminal disease, or someone they love is going through a period of time, like my grandfather when he was in the ICU with pneumonia. But turning that on its head, you could also give prayer shawls for a positive occasion. If the person you want to give this to is, let's say, getting married or having a baby, these make excellent shower gifts, and you could include a prayer along with the shawl as part of the gift just to kind of personalize it for the individual. In the end, prayer shawls can really be whatever you want them to be, but part of the idea is to help assign meaning to it and help the person understand your intent with the gift giving, but also keeping in mind their needs, especially if they have a medical situation. So, prayer shawls are one of my favorite gifts to make and give to family members especially, and there are so many free patterns on AllFreeKnitting that you can take a look at and turn into a prayer shawl for your loved ones.